Welcome back, puppies, to another Barking Dog Studio video. In this video I'm painting up some bandits, some highwaymen, some thugs, some ne'er-do-wells. Right here I'm just using some model color dark flesh as a base skin tone. And in a later video, I'll show how I brought it up to a mid-tone and then a highlight. But for right now, we're just getting down the base. Okay, now I've already painted the pants. I've used a fantasy game color, or fantasy and games line from Skill Color. It was Bloodfest Crimson is the base, and here I'm just touching it up. Now I'm starting to lay down some stripes, and I'm using Miskatonic Gray, I believe is how you pronounce it. And I'm just doing this to add some visual appeal to the pants, because they're really, it's a lot of real estate just to leave a solid color, you know, with some shading. You want to give it something a little more than just plain straight flat color. So here I'm using gray to add some stripes. And when you're doing something like this, you want to pay attention to the folds and wrinkles in the fabric and not just make a straight line over those. A lot of times when you're wearing clothes that have straight lines on them or stripes, wherever there's like a fold or a wrinkle, it'll kind of offset the stripe or the line. So you want to be aware of that as you're painting and kind of offset your lines as you're drawing them so they're not perfectly straight. In areas where there's a flat, smooth run, you want to try to get as straight as line as possible, and that's really just a matter of a steady hand. And then later, as I'll demonstrate, just going back and touching up some of the paint around the stripe. And that's what I'm doing here, actually, is I'm going back with some of that Bloodfest Crimson. Just wherever I felt like the line was too bold, or maybe there's a little bit of overpaint, I'm just touching it up. And back to making stripes. And here I'm just making the lines a little, not necessarily bolder, but I'm making the color a little more opaque. So I'm tracing over them again, because I use such a thin version of it. You can still see some of the maroon through the stripe, and so I'm going over them with another layer to get a little more opaque. Now this guy's legs were a lot of fun to paint just because there are so many more wrinkles in his pants. So I had to kind of offset the stripe quite a lot. So it was a little bit more challenging, which made it a little bit more fun. Again, on this first pass, the paint that I'm laying down is kind of transparent, but I'm not worried about that. The first pass is really just to get the paint down, try to get it as straight as possible, but I'm not going to lose any sleep over it because I'm going to go back later and touch it up and put another layer down to get it to stand out. The main thing right now is just getting it down where I want the lines to be. And a lot of the trick to doing this isn't necessarily having a fine tip brush. The brush that I'm using there is a excuse me, I'm looking at it, it's a Raphael number 2. I have a Winsor Newton number 2 that I use fairly frequently as well. And the bristles on it are about the same. Just because they're both 2 doesn't mean that the bristles are actually equal thickness, because each company kind of has their own guidelines that they follow, and they don't necessarily translate. The numbers on the sides of brushes don't necessarily translate across your name brands. But the trick is to having a really good point on your brush. The point is more important than how thick the brush actually is. As long as you're using a detail brush, you'll be alright. You just want a detail brush with a really nice point. Look at some of the work going on there. And you can see there's still some transparency, and some of the lines there on his lower left leg need to be cleaned up a little bit. And that's what you see me doing here on this other model. So I'm going back and I'm just straightening up my lines. And I'm doing that by using the original base color for the pants, which is the Bloodfest Crimson. Rock on, puppies.